Hi everyone. Can anyone hear us? Okay, yes. Nice. All right. Let's wait for another 1 minute for people to join us as soon as possible and then we can kick off very soon. All right, guys. I would definitely would love to hear what you guys do. So if on the chat box you can just drop what are your job titles or what is your background, especially whether it is application security or engineering, that will be very great. If you can just drop on the chat bot, we will try to tailor the webinar more better. Okay, we have people joining from GRC, VAPT. Okay, that's amazing. Okay, we have the teaming experts as well on our team.
Good to see a lot of different backgrounds.
Yes. Yeah. All right. I think Lalita Prakash can get started right now. First of all, thank you everyone for joining today's session for AI Pentesting. And it has been like we are seeing a lot of tools right now in the market who are doing a lot of AI this, AI that, a lot of things going on right now. But if you ask me back in 2020 or 2021, anyone would have told me, okay, we can automate pen testing. I would have definitely laughed them on their face because for me, it has been like pen testing is very much intuitive. It needs a lot of context and we need a lot of human intelligence to drive all the activities. But right now, with the AI developments in the last 1 year, especially, the entire software engineering has changed. And along with a lot of development in the AI arena, even right now, if you ask me, it's no more a question whether we can automate pen testing. It's more about how much more we can do with the AI stuff. So before taking any more time with the introductions and everything, I would like to introduce our speakers today. First up, Prakash. He is a head of security at Strobes, and he has his background in application security, cloud security, DevSecOps, and right now he has been heavily invested with AI as well. So you will be hearing much more from his personal experience in pen testing and all of those information. And next up, we have Lalita. She's a solutions engineer at Strobe. She is in regular conversations with hundreds of our customers, and she has a great affinity to convert complex ideas into very real world use cases. So, just to introduce the folks, and before we jump into the training session right now, I would also tell that anyone who has joined this session, before the end of this webinar, we will be sharing some free credits for AI pen testing, wherein it's not enough to run like pen testing on big applications, but you can definitely try it out on your own. It's a hands free rather than just, we will not be talking at a theoretical term. So please stay live till the end of this session so you will get more details about it. And let's go ahead, guys. Over to you, Prakash and Lalita.
Thanks, Lalita, for that. Again, I see a lot of different disciplines of cybersecurity response in the chat. So again, thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope we'll have a great session.
Perfect. Hey everyone, glad to be here. And yeah, as everybody from my team mentioned, definitely we're going to be having a great walkthrough in terms of understanding AI pen test and then going further into the nitty gritties of it and how, of course, we are doing it and how you can definitely get more information around these elements. Yeah, glad to be here and look forward to proceeding further from here. All right, so I think we can just get started real quick. Just wanted to quickly set up the agenda for this particular session. Of course, AI pen testing being the major setup of conversation over here. Around those similar lines, we also have multiple detailed elements, whether it is understanding the architecture, how the process actually works, of course, the live product demonstration, how it's functioning end to end, along with how this solution again is working for enterprises, MSSPs, and of course, at core level with the help of security professionals who are core level at security or pen testing practices and are going to be most benefited from these kind of technologies that are coming into the picture. So all those terminologies, elements we're going to be covering in this particular session one by one. Starting off with what is AI pen testing, as we say, primarily any kind of pen test process that you are knowing as of now, whether it is running an application scan, whether it is having a manual pen test end to end, all of it can actually be automated leveraging different autonomous agents. Now they replicate the similar process as it happens through the manual setup. And it, of course, creates the real world simulation along with validated findings, required reports that you might get at the very end of the testing cycle. And it all happens through the autonomous agents, which automates the entire process end to end. You can, of course, cover different sections of your pen test setup, whether it is your applications, your cloud, your network, your APIs, or any further section that might need a pen test or even a vulnerability scan. All of it can be done leveraging these sort of setup principles that are there in picture. Now, of course, considering we have different folks here from different cybersecurity backgrounds, I would love to hear how primarily you guys are doing the pen test on your end and how much time primarily you spend conducting one single pen test assessment. So you'll be having like a poll on your screen coming right now. You can just go ahead, your input, and we would love to get an understanding on where exactly it is coming from your side. Proceeding further over here, starting from the automation problem that never actually got an attention and nobody actually thought about solving it. Initially, if I go 5, 7 years back, talking about this autonomous pen test process, it was actually just a, I would say, glorified scanner being positioned as a pen testing, where it was just a nuclei scan being run, a PDF report was produced, and then you used to get that report marketing in terms of giving you as a manual or I would say an automated pen test setup. But in reality, it was just a pattern matching setup and it really did not had, I would say, any reasoning brains. It was just running around similar generic processes and it failed immersely when we talk about any custom application coming into the picture or in case there is any niche based application use case or even specific environmental factors that are affecting the kind of custom setup that might be there in picture. Now, slowly, when we moved towards the AI a few years back, when LLM models were introduced, this process actually got into really a reasoning based approach rather than just matching the pattern, right? It came into having this autonomous model being there with its own brain, able to make decisions midway within the setup and able to generate or I would say replicate how the actual pen testers would be performing the testing, right? It actually can decide what to follow or an alternate approach whenever any particular path fails and will actually build or work as an AI agent system that reasons like an actual security professional or a pen testers. Now, when we talk from a core security standpoint, where Prakash has been working within the technical setup of all those problem statements where he works with security teams, he hears security professionals talking about these kind of challenges. So Prakash, what's your take primarily over here when you hear security professionals coming and talking about how the things have changed and where they are heading right now? What is your input over here?
I could probably, we both have been in a lot of customer
Yeah.
calls, and we've seen one of the common points being that they have a lot of ticket volumes and they don't know each of the ticket volume if they're efficient enough with the automation pipelines or even the pentest reports that they get. And apart from that, there's a lot of issues, especially in the agentic systems. These days, you have a flow, but then it works in very silo, right? In a silos form. So many of
Yeah.
our customers had told that context management, scope enforcement, and addressing the time versus skill, right? That's a very big problem for most of the customers when they have too many pen test requests coming along, right? So probably I think that's the reason we should probably talk about what a normal automation looks and then what an agentic automation looks, especially at Strobes, right?
Exactly. Absolutely makes sense, Prakash. And that's how when we move forward, talking from agent versus script workflow, where how it used to happen maybe at a script level, and then when agents came in, what actually changed, and how it's actually speeding up the entire pen test process. And you have seen that happening pretty much at scratch level. So you can definitely add more value how it was primarily when we used to follow just a simple script and then how it transformed when we actually launched the autonomous or automated stuff into the picture.
Right. So when we talk in absolute software terms, right, we say that we define an automation pipeline and say that it's an A to B to C flow.
Yeah.
A being, as you see in the slide, right, it says you run nmap, you pass the output, run nuclei again, generate and parse an output in a particular report format. But what's missing is capable reasoning, not just blind LLM reasoning, and adding on top of that the right amount of capabilities and skills for the particular tools, right, to efficiently run. That's something that is missing at most of the agentic layers that I see. And at the same time, I have a strong feeling that most security engineers' problem is the frequency of these automations, given that there are too many systems and too many contexts that they have to manage across. That's where I think the agentic systems will solve the problem. At least that should be the aim for every security engineer to utilize a agentic system.
Exactly. And then there has to be a system for every process that an agentic automation is coming through, whether it is different type of maybe pen testing processes that are happening, if it is code review, just how Strobes has actually set it up. So primarily talking from an agent architecture standpoint, we of course have a centralized orchestrator that again is covered across multiple agents that can run parallelly, even to conduct different type of vulnerability or pen test assessments. Starting off, it of course covers your web application, your breach simulation, your network security, code reviews, configuration reviews, all those different kinds of processes where it is already trained, it already has all the input elements, whether it is, I would say, frameworks that needs to be followed or compliance standards it has to know, and then how the end-to-end process primarily comes through. So all of it is already there embedded in this simple structure or this agent workflow. You just have to plug and play, leverage it, give it an input, primarily your scope, and it can just go ahead and run it pretty seamlessly, making sure you have the desired or the lookalike output as we get from a manual pen test, right? Along those lines, of course, when we talk about the detailed infrastructure that is running primarily from a backend, and probably Prakash, you of course have a lot of hands-on element when we talk about different infrastructure elements, whether it is browser handover, whether it is browser bridge, jump box shell, how it primarily works at Strobes level. Again, you can definitely add more value here.
So yeah, so if I put my pen tester hat, forget about agentic systems and all of
Yeah.
that for a second, right? Most of the pen testers' abilities is deeply inherited in their ability to crawl, discover, and find out all kind of hidden endpoints and act according. That's the human intelligence that is required. And I'd probably steal your term saying that we are trying to replicate a human capability across the agentic behavior. That's the goal, right? So we have built up an agentic harness that exactly does all of this operations. It's not just any other agentic tool wherein it is purpose driven and it is actually built for a cybersecurity, especially offensive security operations. And pen testing is at the core of it. And across customer calls, right, we say that how are you sure that your agent is able to discover a lot of endpoints? Browser bridge is the answer, and browser handover, because most of your application pen tests, API pen tests, they don't usually a human would crawl it end to end, right? That's the capability we have given to the agentic system in terms of a feature called browser bridge. And similarly, in all of our customers calls, we get the requirements saying that most of the time, most of the areas is the environmental constraints that they have, right? They want the executions to happen at their own environment because obviously they'll have a lot of policies, a lot of restrictions and compliance operations to follow. To address that, we have something called jump box shell, where you can inherit the agentic platform capabilities and execute with a shell connection as a bridge and make execution much more seamless for your environment. So that way, we are trying to address a lot of these problems, which we have seen on a recurring basis in an agentic model and just in general in a pen testing streamline. But I think I'd also say that these are all pretty serious terms. Many of the times we've been asked, like, how do you govern the data? How do you think the AI systems are secure? I think probably you'll have a lot to say because of your interactions as well, a fair
Yeah.
amount.
Absolutely. I totally get where you are going from here. And of course, when I interact with organizations day in, day out, CISOs, directors, and of course, security professionals who come back and say, especially if they're coming from, I would say, financial or manufacturing background, they do have a lot of compliance policies to cover, and then they do not want their data to be leveraged in terms of not the correct policies or data handover practices. So, in terms of making sure how Strobes is handling or covering that particular challenge, we of course have implemented a lot of different workflows in place, starting off with HITL, which is human in the loop. Whereas any critical operation that needs to be performed, whether it is running a scan on the internal environment, connecting with a particular setup, creating the vulnerabilities out of the scanner output, all those critical operations primarily are governed by a human intervention. So a human actually will be there overseeing the entire AI operation and then can actually approve what can be done through the AI and what actually needs to be blocked. So that actually help the teams segregate and make sure the AI is working in the defined boundaries. In addition to that, of course, there are enterprise level guardrails coming in from a lot of enterprise customers or even mid-market customers who come through who have very certain policies about handling the data, whether it is their PII information, credential information. Some companies want it to be masked, whereas the other companies want that to not be accessible by the AI at all. So those kind of elements when come into the picture, of course, there are industry specific guardrails implemented within the Strobes platform itself. But on top of it, of course, organization would want to have custom guardrails built where they can write their own rules, they can set up the configurations, and accordingly, AI will desire to work in that specified boundary that is defined by the organizations, making sure the data handling is protected and it is only accessing or giving information that, again, it is allowed to perform or take. So that's how the challenge primarily is being sorted. And hence, if I come back to end-to-end workflow, how it primarily happens at Strobes level. And again, if you see the process, Prakash, you might have seen that multiple times when you have been in the test space and then when you talk to testers on how we do it also internally within our system when we follow either manual practices or even now with the help of automated setup that we have in place, right?
Right.
Starting with scoping, then we have discovery, then there's testing, then of course finding out the vulnerabilities, the validation, and of course the final step that is the reporting. Now this entire process is being replicated through the AI agent system as well, where of course the input scope would be provided by the organizations where they are conducting the testing. Then the discovery pretty much happens automatically, whereas the attack surface scanning happens. Any sort of information, if it is available at the internet regarding the scope, will be fetched. Then the vulnerability assessment or scanning or testing phase comes in play, where the autonomous testing setup is done and a lot of vulnerabilities and gaps are actually identified. On top of it, once the findings are identified, the major human element when we talk about manual pen test is also the validation part, where the human will actually come in with their security expertise and will say, yeah, out of these 100 vulnerabilities, we have validated, and these 80 are the true positive ones. And this is the impact for these vulnerabilities. Now, this is a major chunk of the human expertise, and that's what is exactly being replicated through the AI processes, where they do have that reasoning engine in place where they can actually make decision, do the evidence process at the back end as well, telling you, okay, out of the validation process, these many findings has actually come towards as a true positive or the actual risk for your organization. And these are the ones that were really just the false positive elements. And similar process again, or similar results, as I would say, are again positioned in the final report that you're going to be getting at the end of any sort of pen test. And then when we talk about how AI primarily is reducing that triage noise, so again, it is considering multiple elements to come to that conclusion, whereas it says, okay, now this vulnerability is again at the closure level, or you are primarily trying to take it as a true positive element out of the pen test cycle. So it does consider your exploitability evidence, your asset context, your threat intelligence, and of course, environmental factors. So it have that 4 dimension setup in place, whereas it is giving you the clear validation picture after having a lot of evidence-based approach running at the backend. So you know whatever the AI is talking about, it has a solid proof at the backend, and it is not just a pattern matching or a reasoning workflow that does not really have the capabilities. And similarly, if we talk about this entire process, how it runs from a live platform standpoint. Now, Prakash, again, you definitely are going to be going in detail about the process. So, what are the elements that we are going to be covering in this particular demo, initiating with how the scoping and launching of an application happens? What is the agent reasoning process, how it captures the information, how it processes further from that, finding validation, and then definitely the finding reporting in place, which is the last layer, or I would say last step of the entire pen test process. So would love, Prakash, for you to take that up and help our audience get a live understanding of how it's happening the Stokes way.
Absolutely. You've hit it straight because one thing that I again want to touch base on is that we've seen the end-to-end workflow and also the capabilities. There are different agentic systems available. Before I deep dive into the demo, I was excited to build with alongside the team at Strobes because this is whole and soul to, for, and from by the security engineers. They've developed it from scratch, and it's not a general purpose agentic harness. The general agentic harness might be like a wrapper around a general purpose model, but this is entirely driven and it is focused to be an offensive security agentic harness. But I also want to be respectful of the time. I'll probably straight to get into the demo and probably showcase how we can perform agentic pentests in our application. Although I see there's a lot of features that we can touch base on, but I'll probably stick to the agentic pentest flows that we have available in the platform, and probably we can take it from there.
Yeah, we're good to go, Prakash.
All right, lovely. I'll get straight to it, right? There are two ways you can perform an agentic pen test in the Strobes ecosystem, right? The first way is something called engagements. You find it in this pretty option over here, and you can select something called new engagement. So engagement is nothing but a collection of SOWs, right? For those from security background will be familiar. A scope of work might be web application, API, network, and so on and so forth, right? You can select new engagement. I want agentic pen testing. I would select the assessment types. There are an n number of assessment types, and there might be a more as well. But let's say I want to go ahead, perform a web application pen test from an agentic system. So in that case, I would select web application, go ahead, configure the details, give a particular URL. Let's say I say something called strobes.co. And if I would want to add a custom credential, I would go ahead, create a custom credential, add them as well. So we have a feature to add custom credentials. And this is where we talked about, right? There was this execution environments. The default environment is Cloud Sandbox, but again, you can add your own execution environments. That gives you a lot more leverage. And then every pentest activity has a deadline, right? So you start a particular date and you end at a particular date. This is quite seamless. And the custom instructions is where you would say what are the focus areas and what are the authentication boundaries or out of scope items that you want to provide, right, for a particular flow. But again, like I said, there are two different ways of running agentic pentests. Now, this particular way where we are trying to simulate it from engagements, this is typically useful, in my opinion, is for someone for an internal team where there are large amount of ticket volumes for pentests to be done, right? On a recurring basis. There might be a weekly API clearance tickets, security clearance tickets, and there might be a lot of ad hoc security requests, especially for pentests. And that's where this agentic engagements flow, it inherits all of the default capabilities that a security pentest should have. For example, a scope definition, asset creation, performing reconnaissance, endpoint discovery, deep crawling, and then again, performing attack surface analysis, broken access controls, auth and auth family of attacks, testing different kinds of injection attacks, be it client, be it JavaScript-based injection or a SQL-based injection, or so on, or a template-based injection, right? So on and so forth. So all of these categories are preloaded by the agentic harness. And since we have selected web application, it also calls web application agents, right? All of it is robustly taken care in the platform itself. So if anyone wants to go ahead and solve for internal use cases where they have a lot of ticket volumes and want to clear the security clearances at the same time, ensure that the standards are well maintained, right? Because if you see the testing areas, you could see SQL injection, XSS, most of the common areas that normally you would find, and also compliance, right? There are many a times we see that OWASP top 10 being the gold standard, and then ASVS being the gold standard for APIs and web applications and mobile applications, right? So in such cases, we have default preloaded compliance frameworks so that the engineer doesn't have to do a much of a job, just configure, and once he go ahead and he clicks, he can launch the particular assessment. Now, once he launches, he would find something called workspaces alongside. There are a lot of features over here, but again, keeping the interest of time for the audience, I would like to touch base on some powerful features. So if you go to workspaces, so once you launch an assessment from an engagements flow, which we went a while ago, you would see something called a workspace created with a particular name, a default name being loaded. You can see it as a new workspace at the time. So in this workspace, you will find a lot of options. And now let's assume that there will be another case where the second scenario for an agentic pen test, where there might be cases where a security engineer is very much interested to find vulnerabilities by himself and augment his capabilities with security systems, right? So in that cases, you could use something called workspaces. Workspace is nothing but a funnel of activities, right? These activities can be files, scoping documents, findings, different assets that you're configuring for a application or a network pen test, something along those lines, right? It's like a project kit for you. So how you do is you go ahead and select new workspace, And just like we saw in the engagements flow, all right, we have different templates and options available. You can select any of it. So let's assume I want to go with web pentest, or I want to build my blank workspace, because I, as a security engineer, want to leverage agentic system and use a lot of customization. So this process, again, is only for those who would love to use a lot of customizations, have targeted set of security testing, and do not want all the default phases of methodology to be loaded, right, on an incremental basis. So that's where this becomes the capability. So if you go ahead, select blank workspace, you can describe what the workspace looks like. Like you can say, perform a pen test on target URL, saying https test.com, something like that. Select the model. And again, if you see over here, this is what Lalita was talking around. I think we touched base on human approvals. These are agent actions. Like any of the actions that are done will go through a human approval. You select the model, and then you launch the workspace. Now, the moment you launch workspace, you have something called workspace setup, which is like a initialization agent. What it does is it makes the agent system to understand that it has to load all the right capabilities, all the right asset scope details for the security engineer to work with, right? So if you see over here, it will also be very interactive in nature. So let's assume that it would say that, hey, do you feel that I have to have a larger scope and not just a singular scope? You can add those details as well. And let's say if you have missed adding your credentials, you can also add it over here. But again, the recommended way is to add it via credentials manager, which we saw, right? Now, once you have a workspace set up, it would take about 5 minutes or so to spin up. I have a sample workspace set up. Now over here, in a sample workspace, you would see these options. Now, these options are quite robust. The overview section tells a lot of details about what kind of actions are pending, what kind of coverage is there, and quick actions, right? If you want to run a full assessment again, or if you want to test authentication details that you provided, or if you want to validate findings. Now, this is especially useful when you have a lot of retest requirements coming on an incremental basis, right? So it becomes a suit for a security engineer to perform all of his workspace tasks on an application or an asset, right? It could be even network. And it can also check for false positives, right? Now, the second powerful feature is called the agentic task, where this is where you actually give the agent the task what you want to do, right? So let's assume I would spin up a task saying that, hey, perform an in-depth pen test on a particular URL, allow agents to sign up and perform a login and perform an authenticated testing. So now, like you recall, there was a multi-agent architecture. The agentic harness is channeled in such a way that all of its agents are, again, cybersecurity agents for security pen testing capabilities. Since we had it for web pen test, we spawn up web pen test agents, right? Now, this is how each of these tasks will call relevant sub-agents. So sometimes they might be a crawler agent, they might be a separate agent to check for JWT tokens, they might be certain agents that might do a lot of endpoint discovery, so on and so forth, right? So if you see here, it calls all of these tasks one by one. So all you have to do is go ahead and create a task. Just add and give an instruction, and you're good to go. Now, for a sample basis, we gave an application. So we've tested it on real-time applications and labs, where we gave a lot of race condition issues and parameter pollution issues, which are normally not picked by agentic systems. And this is the task we had given, and it was able to pick up at least 4 out of 5 of such issues. Again, so these are certain important features that we can look at. And again, like I said, each and every action will have a pending approval or a human in the loop request. Once an agent task is executed, it will always seek for your approval, saying that if it has found a finding, do you want to approve the action or do you want to reject an action? Now, at the end of the day, you will see an input request and approvals. So normally the time taken for all of these tasks to happen on an average is about 2 hours. But yeah, I think these are some of the robust capabilities that we have for the agentic system. And again, there's another feature called learnings, where within the workspace, you can add or you can train the agent on a learning, right? You can say that, hey, do you know how do you have to authenticate to a particular application feature? Or all you can do is give it a title and then give it a description and a narrative. Now, this can be a very detailed, stepwise narrative. And that way you can go ahead and probably give a detailed instructions to it so that the agent learns that. It also has the capability of recording a browser session. So let's say if I'm going ahead and giving it something called strobes.co, which is my target asset, and start recording, it would spin up a browser session and automatically learn every detail about the application's endpoints, crawl its particular details, and every particular other libraries that are loaded, right, along with the features. So once I stop the recording, right, it would create an automatic learning where the tester doesn't have to do a lot of these actions. So that's the reason the workspaces are more important to understand more customizations and give the power back to the security engineer or the security analyst or automation engineer or a DevSecOps engineer, right? This is where you use the workspaces to absolutely customize as much as details as possible. I think that's a pretty quick knack of the demo. I actually can take time and go along longer, but I think in the interest of time, I'll probably go ahead and we can discuss about the other aspects as well and talk about what are the other capabilities and what are the other results that we have found during our agentic pen tests. Okay, so since we have many customers who have used our platform and they have scaled their pen tests, again, let's say one of our customers used our agentic system to scale 20 of their ad hoc API requests and application pen tests in a matter of 3 weeks, right? And the learning curve was somewhere around 1 to 2 weeks, provided there are a lot of knowledge learning academies part of the platform itself. And they also, what they found is using our agentic harness, which was again entirely built for offensive capabilities, most of the AI results turned out to be true positives, meaning a lesser false positive rate. And also, all of them were sticking to the compliance areas that were mentioned, like OWASP top 10, SAMS 25, and any customization as well. Let's say, for example, checking for RBAC, authn, and auth endpoints, right, on all of the API endpoints or network services, right? These are some things that most of our results had. That's what we observed in most of our results. And also, we have something called open benchmarks, which is probably where we look into a lot of the results and try to see what are the benchmarks we are looking at. So currently, most of the, like I said, like we had a higher hit of true positive ratios in real-time applications with customers and also in our internal applications. So we have published an open source benchmarks. We'll probably write a blog on how these benchmarks are contemplated. But again, more or less, these benchmarks are more about discovery rate, exploitation factors, agent context, false positive rates, and what are the time and ETS to get a finding, and how can you validate it very quick? Because this way you save a lot of time as well for engineers to, it actually saves their time because they don't have to do, again, revalidation. And at the same time, like I reiterate, it sticks very well, and there's a lot of scope enforcement and boundary enforcement in terms of its coverage, right, which is quite missing in most of the agentic systems. So we have something called Agent Showcase. This is a public URL. Maybe I can, if you can see the screen, right? All of the findings that has come up from this Agent Showcase, these have been business logic related vulnerabilities, race conditions, second order SQL injections, template injections with respect to server-side template injections, right? Maybe applications using Jinja or Twig. And then again, using a lot of chained attacks, wherein we also found a lot of vulnerabilities on vendor platforms, near CVs as well, where we found a lot of CVs, which was not inherently possible because most of the times, whatever the agents have found, the human experts were not able to find. So those are something were interesting findings for us. And that clearly says that using the agentic capabilities will augment the security testing much faster, save time, and also have efficient skill coverage in terms of your assets. Okay, some of the common questions that we get is that, hey, I've been hearing a lot about agentic systems. How do I know that all these findings are true positive? You've been saying that this is true positive and etc. That's where the agentic harness and the architecture is built around, wherein each of the finding goes through a quality check itself internally in a sub-agent, right? Let's say if a sub-agent reports a finding saying that, hey, this is a finding called a SQL injection, then it says, have you verified XYZ as a step? And XYZ can be, do you have an active proof of a vulnerability or a behavior change? So something along those lines. And let's say even if there is a failure, right? Let's say if it has a 403 request, now it would go ahead, reason back and say that, is it because there is a firewall that is hit a roadblock, or is it too many attempts being done as an application logic that restricts the action? So it has graceful failure, which gives a lot of understanding for the agent to understand if it has actually completed the task as opposed to hallucinating. So these are some of the questions where most of it is around how do I know that these are actual findings? How do I know it won't break in production? Because most of them, again, go through human governance and HITL actions. So that way you can orchestrate your actions and make sure you have the power for most of your actions. For the pricing part, probably, I think Alibaba probably will be a better person to jump in over here and give a bit brief of it to the audience.
All right. Thanks, Prakash and Lalita. That was great. But before we wrap up, I want to quickly talk about something that's usually in the top of mind for everyone, which is the pricing. Now, traditionally, if you think about pen testing, it's pretty expensive, right? But what we have done at Strobes is we have simplified it completely. We use the credit-based model, which is based on like the AI tokens used, the cloud computation, including the cloud sandbox cost, and all of the tool execution, which makes the pricing very transparent as much as possible. We will be addressing all of those things in more detail. If you want to book a demo session with us, we can cover all of those parts. But for this webinar session, if you jump into the next slide, we are giving free 100 AI pen testing credits, wherein what you can do is you can pen test for a small application. Ideally, you would require 400 to 500 credits for a bigger application, but you can just get started with something smaller. With the free credits, you can test out like a few things that are mentioned here. A network pen test with set of APIs, generate a compliance report. You can try all of these things out with the 100 AI Pentest credits. So on the chat box, you can see, you can get the link wherein you can directly get the free AI credits. Our team will enable that for you. So that's about it, folks. And if you have any questions right now, you can drop in the chat box right now. We hardly have only 5 minutes left, so we will try to answer as much questions as possible. Any questions, folks, right now?
I see a couple of questions in the chat, Aliba.
Yeah. How does it work with business logic errors that is not specifically same for all of it? Understand. So for that reason, we have a browser handover. Right now, I understand that this is web application. You can pass in your instructions and describe about the features and give stepwise instructions. And that should be able to take care of business logic findings as well, like race conditions or payment bypasses and all of such sorts. Again, it's packaged into the workspace itself, which we saw, right? So it's a mix of instructions and the stepwise learnings that the agent can understand. So these are certain things that, if equipped, will handle all of these requests.
And there is one more question. What if during pen testing, an application automatically logs out and redirects to the login page after more than 3 to 5 requests are made to unauthorized files? In such cases, if the system attempts to log in again without sending credentials, it may result in the account being logged. How can AI perform pen testing effectively in this scenario?
Correct. So this is a graceful failure wherein when there are a lot of API limits that is enforced on an application. So in that cases, you can instruct the agent to pause that, hey, for every 3 to 5 requests, you might have to pause. And right now, the agentic system is good enough to understand that, let's say, if it has made that error for 3 to 5 requests, right, it would not go ahead and bombard the request again. That's where long running agent tasks are optimized, and they have a waiting period, and again they're reinitialized later again based on the instruction, and again once they are reattempted, right? In short, they would not bombard it once they face the blocker. Instead, they would give a human approval action that is required. They are equipped to understand that they have a waiting period, but if it's a human approval action, it augments its capabilities even higher.
And I saw another question coming in. Can you please cover tickets logging and tracking back once some of them are closed? What are the capabilities to connect with CI/CD pipeline? So to answer that, primarily we do connect with a lot of CI/CD tools within the same platform. And the ticket management ITSM tool connection can also happen in a two-way sync capacity. So we will be having a series of webinars to cover these kind of sections as well. So yeah, please stay tuned. And of course, you can book a one-on-one demo to go further in detail with this. Okay, I think the last question I saw, agentic pen test also depends on LLM, right, to get better results.
I would disagree there. It actually depends on the agentic architecture that you design. The other niche point that we've observed is we've actually used a cheaper model to get the efficient results out, right? Obviously, the LLM models are good enough. They, even if you pass a vague instruction, model capabilities coming in, they understand the vague instruction and comprehend it. But unless you orchestrate and layer around a proper sound agentic harness that can take care of context management, scope enforcement, and load the right amount of skills for each of the sub agent, right? And also perform in a way where long running tasks, especially all of the pen tests are long running tasks, right? So when your tools and logic is able to handle this, that's where LLM models will add more power. Without them, the LLM models will just be a reasoning layer and probably will end up having more costs.
Yeah. And then there is one last question I saw, Prakash. How is your tool different from Expo apart from pricing?
So our platform is a full-blown CTEM platform wherein you have a lot of integrations. This is again primarily only on agentic pen test, but the agentic harness for offensive capabilities is not just limited for pen testing. It can be used for risk-based vulnerability management, triage, automated triage, DevSecOps pipelines, attack surface management, all of them having their own super agents and sub agents, and each of them trained with specific agentic skills and capabilities. Now, agent skills are a very hot topic, but again, most of them are general purpose skills. And we have hardwired and fine tuned the system to only be strictly towards cybersecurity capabilities, right? So that's the reason why probably as a unified platform, we offer even much more robustness for entire security engineering.
Got it. I don't see any more questions. Yeah, I think we have already mentioned any further queries to be dropped at a certain email address. Aliba, over to you.
Also, folks, we understand the time was not sufficient enough to cover all the features and all the AI capabilities that we have. So, if you want to understand more and you would love to deep dive into our platform and the capabilities entirely, we are running a poll here at the moment. You can check in for the book a demo for me, wherein our team will reach out to you and schedule a call. That would be amazing. Or also, I am also adding the link for the demo booking link where you can get your AI 100 credits and also you can book a meeting in your convenience. So thank you everyone. Thank you for joining this session. Thank you Lalita and Prakash for the amazing session together and we will be coming back with more such sessions.
Thank you everyone for your time. Looking forward to connect again. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.